whenever we start a business, the people that always have the 9 to 5s think you're crazy. They're like, are you nuts? Like, you already have a good paying job. What are you doing?
Yeah. Things that are different in society tend to be looked at in a negative way. So if someone is the odd person out, people kind of look and they're like, what are they doing?
This is one of our more tame ones because we're talking about the things in the industry, but we'd run other ones where we talk about conspiracy stuff too. And when we do, we push the envelope, and Owen's looking at me on the side there too. And it's like some of the feedback we get, it's like, man, it's just stick to real estate. I'm like, well, thanks, man. That's not all my personality, right? Welcome. It's the DC Talks podcast. We're at episode 54 with David Chinelli. I'm your host, David Chinelli. And today we have a really special treat for you. We have Seif from Newfore Inc. Did I said that right?
Yeah, you did.
We were talking off air and I was like, am I saying this right? So I just like...
You wouldn't be the first.
Yeah, exactly. Imagine they're doing this whole big plug for you and I get your name wrong. You're like, dude, that's the wrong name.
You know what? I was on Morning Live and the person had asked me, they're like, how do you pronounce your name? And then bam, camera goes on live and he gets it wrong.
No.
Fuck me. That's okay.
You had one job, buddy. Just remember my name, remember the name of the company, and you screwed up. That's it. Done. All right. So Seif is with us from Stoney Creek, right? And he's got this really, really cool business model, especially for us here where we're struggling for homes here in the GTA. Like, as we know, land is, or at least they've told us land is scarce. Sometimes people would argue that in Toronto areas, like that's why they're building like garden suites and they're building homes in the back of the home. So explain a little bit about what your business is and, just how it got started and you're the mastermind behind it.
Sure. So the business is Newfore Inc. We're general contractors. We're based in Hamilton. We focused on a lot of the properties in the Hamilton area. And now we've grown to service everywhere from Toronto all the way to Niagara. We do a variety of different projects. We do the typical projects, which, not too many people are interested in hearing about: homes, commercial units, regular investment properties, which is, the duplexes, triplexes, apartment buildings. But then the one that's getting a lot of media attention recently has been the garden suites. Everybody wants to know about garden suites, ADUs, laneway housing, whatever you want to call them in different municipalities. Yeah. And we started doing quite a bit of them. And mainly again in Hamilton, but then now we're starting to come out to Toronto to do that type of work as well. So we started in 2016 and we moved to Stoney Creek in 2020 around COVID time. And since then, we've done quite a bit of business in Hamilton. In the last 3 years, we've done 150 units in total. Damn. That's between the residential that, they could be end user, it could be residential investors and commercial units. So there's a big variety of what it is. But then again, everyone likes to hear about these garden suites, of course.
Well, yeah, when your PR person messaged me, because again, we met on Instagram, and she's like, just sent me the clip. She's like, it was the tiny homes clip. It's like coming soon. I'm like, this looks really, really cool. Like, yeah, we've seen it before, but I'm like, yeah, the tiny homes. I can see how you're hammering that out. A lot of people are really, really interested in that.
Yeah, they are. And the reason they are is because, every other headline that you read right now, housing, it's unaffordable and all that stuff. And as much as you want to kind of dive into it, it's still unaffordable. And you got to kind of do something with the existing spaces that we have. We get it. We can't build fast enough. So let's retrofit the spaces we have to be able to work for more and more families. Think about it. If you actually pay attention to it, how many families do you know where their kids, younger kids, young couples, young adults that have moved back in with their families in the last 3 years?
Well, it's a ton.
How many, let's say, middle-aged couples with kids have brought in their parents, so the grandparents in the family, back into their home? So the dynamic is changing. It's no longer, the average household is, I think back in the day, it was 2.6 people per household. So think of it, most of it is a couple and a kid. Yeah. It's no longer like that. 2 incomes is not enough to keep a house running. You need much more than that now. So now it's not uncommon to have 3, 4 incomes because there's so many adults living under one roof. And really, are you going to be living under one roof? Everybody using the exact same kitchen, the exact same living spaces. That's going to be a bit difficult. So obviously there's a better way. Mm-hmm. And if you can split up the existing home so that you can have almost 2 separate spaces in there for 2 different generations to be living in, that's definitely a good value add.
Yeah. Well, not to mention too what's happened with Airbnb, for example. Now it has to be part, I'm not sure if you're aware or where you're watching your podcast here in it's Ontario, or is it just Toronto, in which they changed the rules during COVID because obviously during COVID, there was a lot of people that just abandoned homes and units, and there was everyone just flooded the market because a lot of these units were being used as Airbnb. Some people were renting 4 or 5. Actually, I had a friend of mine that told me that one of his clients had rented 40 units, 40, and they just leased them out to Airbnb because that was legal back then. And that obviously when the market kind of crashed during 2020, he had to abandon all those. And that's why there were so many units up for available. And then also with all the housing crisis, people can't afford it. Airbnb had to change their strategy. And one of the strategies is that it has to be part of your principal residence now to rent out. And that's why this would actually, if you wanted to use this as an investment, a garden suite or a laneway like that fits the criteria for you to have to do this. And that makes total sense.
You're right. So there is the other angle of it from an investment standpoint. It's also a great thing to do because a lot of people don't want to rent out their basement because they don't want to be sharing the floor and the ceiling with somebody else. It could be noisy. Sound could go through the ductwork. It's kind of like they're living in the same space as you. So people that don't want that, they can now build a garden suite at the back. You have nothing to do with that tenant, and then you can rent it. You can rent it to long term, and you can even rent it as Airbnb, and that's fine with today's regulation as well. It makes a ton of money.
Well, yeah, and there's a difference between a laneway and a garden suite. I think the garden suite is you can not sell your property, becomes and you use all the utilities. I think you share, but I think a laneway home has its own metering system, and then if you wanted to split it, you're able to do that and actually sell the property. If I believe that's the difference between the two of them.
So it depends who you ask. They're effectively from a code standpoint, it's the same thing. Garden suite, ADU, laneway housing, it's all the same thing. But some lenders differentiate between laneway housing and garden suites. And those specific lenders consider garden suites to have access to the driveway where you can come in immediately from the driveway and you can access it. And laneway housing, you'll come in through the driveway and then make your way to the back of the property where you don't have direct immediate access. So that's the lender's definition between the garden suite and the laneway housing.
Yeah. So obviously you've been learning how to pivot because this actually just started really happening the last few years, I guess, since COVID. Before COVID, I guess we weren't really allowed to do a lot of the stuff, if I remember correctly. I have a property in Roncy, and we have a coach house. We couldn't do that. We weren't allowed to. We weren't allowed to modify that. But since COVID, and now things have changed. Have you noticed you obviously pivoted pretty quickly? And when did you start rolling out these tiny homes? Like, was it immediate, or was it you just had an aha moment like, hey, we can really capitalize on this?
I think, we were in the right place at the right time. We're already in the business. We're doing this type of work. We're doing things that are very similar. We made a few recent partnerships that were already in that space. So we're like, okay, that makes no sense not to go after. So we started about a year and a half ago, and then we've been doing quite a few since then.
So what did you do before? So you said you started the company in 2016?
Yes.
What's your background?
So I studied engineering. I'm a civil engineer by background, and then I went into the construction space right out of school.
Nice.
From there, I used to work in northern BC in these remote location, fly in, fly out. So I got a little bit sick of that life, did it for a year and a half. Then I said, you know what? I want a life. I want to see people. So I moved back here.
You want to see people.
Yeah.
Are you sure now?
Well, with the way I'm going with the garden suites, then it looks like it's going to be more people than ever.
Yeah, no, it's great.
Moved back here. And then what happened was, got a sort of a consulting job where I was doing engineering work as a consultant. Obviously, the pay was half and the expenses was tenfold.
Shit.
So I was like, okay, this doesn't add up. Something is off. So I said, okay, I got to venture out for myself. So I started, what I did is I bought my first property, a rental. And then did a little bit of work to it. Then I bought a second one. It needed a little bit more work. And then I was kind of into it. That's when I first started getting exposed to the renovation and the construction side. And it took off from there.
Well, I tell that to realtors too. One of the questions I had, they had these young realtors. We had a party at my place with some like the close realtors we had. We had about 60 realtors in my house. And I was talking to these younger agents that are like, so if you had any advice for us, I'm like, what would it be? And the reason why I'm bringing this up, let's say, so young realtors, I'm like, do you own your own property? I'm like, no, do you own a rental property? I'm like, you can stay at home, like buy a rental property. Yeah. I don't care if it's a condo, I don't care if it's a house. And then that way you learn how to be a landlord. You'll know what it's taking to carry a property, and it also gets some income. So you can still live with mom and dad, like they're in their 20s, like early 20s. I'm like, you still live with mom and dad, but still experience. That's how I started. Yeah. You still experience how it's like to be an owner. It's hard to, and that's why I say that's the same thing for you. Like you were in the construction before. You're just in, have this idea, and then you're just pointing at people, you do this, you do that. Like, although in the video you did do that. You just came with coffee. Hey, what's going on?
Yeah.
But I always find that it's better to actually be entrenched in it before you become the boss and know and that's perfect. I think that's amazing. That background really, really helps you. Don't you find that?
Yeah, it definitely does. If you don't know what work needs to get done, you can't really tell people to do it. So you got to know to a certain extent. If you don't get 80% of it, then it's, you got some work to do.
Things change all the time. You have to learn how to pivot, right? Of course. So, I get that. So at what point in your mind you're like, I got to start this business, and you just went on a whim and just said, hey, like, we're family. And I always ask this to entrepreneurs because good paying job. What are you doing?
Yeah.
So what was the aha moment, and was there any pushback from family or friends?
There's always pushback because, different or things that are different in society tend to be looked at in a negative way. So if someone is the odd person out, people kind of look and they're like, what are they doing? So anytime you're doing something that's different from whatever the rest of the people are, you're going to get a bit of criticism.
Of course.
I'm sure you see it plenty.
Oh, yeah. Well, people, I always worry about this podcast because like this is one of our more tame ones because we're talking about the things in the industry, but we run other ones where we talk about conspiracy stuff too. And when we do, we push the envelope, like, and Owen's looking at me on the side there too. And it's like some of the feedback we get, it's like, man, it's because again, you're pushing the envelope. It's not something everybody talks about. And some people don't like that, right? They'll push back, like, just stick to real estate. I'm like, well, thanks, man. That's not all my personality, right?
That's true.
Yeah. So I like that. So a little bit back to the business. Okay. So I saw that one video we're looking at. You looking at a garage, you walked in, you're like, and it's kind of a little dilapidated and figure out. So you're looking at a garage. It's like, I was trying to say, do you use do you look at it and say, look at the foundation? Do you figure out, like, are you able to put second stories on there? Like, how does the whole process work? And obviously, is it like a home, or, there's some parts of Toronto, which you're not even allowed to touch the foundation, if I'm correct, right? Like you have to keep like the structure of the look of the home. It's almost, and then you're able to build on it, but you can't go deep. Is that correct?
So, yes, it's, here's how it works. Number one, it always works backwards from the client budget, because the budget is what dictates how much work you can do. If somebody has an existing garage in the back and they say, oh, I have, $120,000, then there's no options. You're working as much as possible with that shell, and you're going to dress it up cosmetically on the inside and then add what you got to add, run the utilities and all that stuff. There's no room in the budget. If someone says, I want to invest $250,000, $350,000, then what you're going to do is you're going to be adding onto the garage. And then you got to be strategic with where you're adding. You either will add on the back, you'll add above, or you may add both. But you're going to be getting more rent for it. So it's a different type of investment. So I would say it always starts from whatever the budget is. And then we can decide on a technical standpoint what you can do in the garage. So if you have a garage, like I said, where the existing shell is decent, that's usually the best bang for your buck. Doesn't mean it's bringing the most rent per month, but in terms of the dollars you're putting in, you don't have to redo a lot of the shell. So that's a really good place to start. But again, someone wants to make a bigger investment. They just pulled out a refinance. They got to put that money to work. You can do a lot more. And we'll find that the existing structures back in the day, a lot of things weren't built with any permits. So they may have put a house right up on the lot line. Today, you need a setback depending on which side of the lot, but at least 4 feet, right? So if you decide to take that wall down, you can't put it up in that same spot again. So if you have a tight lot and now you got to shift that wall 4 feet in and do all this extra foundation work, you may not be getting a return on your investment.
Right.
So those are the cases where we go in case by case and see what exactly is the best fit, starting from your budget and making your dollar go further.
So I'm thinking from my, and sorry for being because I always want to do this. So I'm personal side, but maybe a little selfish because for a couple of reasons. We have, again, the property I have in Ronzi, it's a 6-plex.
Okay.
So in the back, we have a shared coach house. Coach house back in the day was for the horses. That's how old the home is, right? And it's an existing structure. If we knock it down, we're told we're not allowed to build it up. But when the garden suites came out, we were thinking, okay, maybe we'll convert this. Now, twofold question for you. One was that I share a wall with my neighbor. So would we be allowed to build on my half of that coach house and doing something with the shared wall? Or do I have to have his buy-in, or are we allowed to without that?
We'd have to check that specific address because you mentioned it's already a 6-plex, right?
Yeah.
So the reason garden suites are so easy is because so don't quote me word for word, but it's up to 5 units. And I believe in Toronto, you're allowed 5 units. Yeah. So anything over 4 or definitely over 5 is subject to a minor variance.
Yeah, this is my second question.
Yeah.
Because with most banks, believe it or not, it's like if you want to keep your property as a residential property, it has to be under 3 to 4 units, 3 to 4 doors, right? I'm with RBC. RBC allowed us to do 6 units. That's why we're able to have that. But if I add the garden suite and it became the property, so this is my second question. I was like, if we added the garden suite, am I allowed to sever that and have it as its own entity?
As of right now, no. But when it does, that's a game changer because it's effectively a house.
Well, yeah, it'd be huge, right? So I'd have to drive through it to get to the back. But if it becomes its own, like we have a shared, almost like an easement between my home and the garden suite, and then we put in, I could put like a 2-story, have a few more units, and then I could have 8 units, and if it's at its own entity. Because again, so for the listeners out there, what happens in my situation, and well, I guess you would know this as well, is that anything over 6 units now becomes commercial. So a commercial means I have to have a mortgage, which is higher. And then I have to start paying commercial taxes, which is like double or triple in there. Everything changes. The whole dynamic changes. And I have to have a whole bunch of sets of drawings and everything to get accomplished after that becomes harder. So that's why we stuck under the 6. We haven't done anything with it. Yeah.
So one of the reasons that the garden suites are so attractive is because with the new bill, you don't have to go through any minor variants. You don't have to go through any rezoning. That's what makes it attractive.
Yeah.
There's not that much headache and there's not that much paperwork that you got to do in comparison to a typical development. You can convert any address into up to 4 units, under 5 units.
Yeah.
So that's what makes it so attractive. So the second you have to go through all that red tape again, it makes it less attractive because you know how it works. There's more fees, development charges, yada, yada, yada. And then now
inspectors,
all of a sudden,
especially Toronto inspectors.
Yeah. You'll get those either way. But like on the planning and development side, there's a lot more cost, a lot more time, and a lot more money that's involved.
And does your team do that? Work with people to do that? Do you have somebody that
we have architects that we work with on every single one of these projects? So yes.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, because we want to come to you for the one-stop shop.
Yeah.
If I have to get my own, a lot of times the architects aren't talking with the builder and there's just a lot of disconnect. I find that it causes a lot of stress.
That's usually when you get a lot of the overages, but then who's the last one that's sort of, holding on to the project? Yeah, the contractors. So that's why people are like, oh, look at the contractors over budget. But what we originally got may not have been buildable in a practical sense,
Right.
So that's when it's very important to weed out all the mistakes and the loose ends with the design at the beginning. So that's when you can actually have that discussion. If you have a contractor that works directly with that architect, the architect is known to build things design things that are constructible, not make unreasonable assumptions, you're going to have a project with way less overages.
Makes sense. And what about converting a garden suite? And is there any difference between like having a commercial spot? So for example, I want to turn my garage upstairs into a salon. I don't want to actually have a bed, but you can still have a shower. I guess technically we can you run a business? Is there any different regulations for that? Or is it mostly just for residential?
It's residential.
Yeah. You're not allowed to do that.
Yeah. I don't want to say not allowed because I'm sure you might be allowed in some areas that have mixed use zoning, but that's case by case basis.
Right.
And that's a development, no longer a renovation.
Right. Okay.
Again, more red tape doesn't mean it's impossible, but more red tape.
And so when you started the business, so you were talking about you have all this team, do you have a number of employees? Like how many do you have people working for you at this point?
So right now we have 20 people in-house and that's between the office and the field. And then we have all our sub-trades as well. Sub-trades, we have plenty. Can't even count them.
The reason why I'm asking, I'm wondering about turnaround time. So if I call you and say, hey, so I want to build a garden suite. How long is there a backlog for me to get somebody out to there? And what's beginning from construction? So what's the whole process between you meeting me, do the plans? I know it all depends on budget. So I say I already have my money. Okay. I have $250,000.
Okay.
So I call you and I say, hey, I want to build a garden suite. How fast can you be out here? I have $250,000. Go.
Okay. You don't have the permit.
No.
Okay. So step 1, we'll do the design phase and then go through the building permit. That could take anywhere from realistically 2 months to 3 months. There's, very few cases where it takes longer than that, but it is possible for it to take longer than that if there's specific, challenges on the project. Those 2-3 months are up, then we can build it. So as long as that timeline lines up with, call it April to October, November, if we're lucky. So basically at the warm times when we can actually dig, then it's going to take 4 to 5 months to build the garden suite. If it's an existing retrofit, then it's a lot easier to do. It could take 3.5 to 4 months.
And so for the first part, if you have a plan, like digging, you're saying too, that's from scratch. There's no garage already there from there, right?
Under which scenario?
The first scenario you were saying too. Like, so
no matter what, you're going to have to tie the utilities. So no matter what, that trench with the services and the digging, you're going to have to do it, whether it's an existing or whether it's brand new.
And it doesn't matter if there's a garage on the property now yet, or like if you have to pour
even if you have
foundations?
the garage there, odds are there's 99.9% chance that both the water requirements and the actual service that's coming in, the size of the water service that's coming in, and the size of the drain and the power and panel, odds are that all three of those are right there at the correct amounts is very slim.
Yeah, I get that. Wow.
Yeah.
Well, and it's been pretty popular. I'm saying like obviously it's been a lot going around. Are you getting a lot of phone calls now? Have you noticed any change like with I guess with the dollar, when interest rates go up, you were saying people instead of looking somewhere else, they look in their backyard and scratching their heads and saying, hey, this might be a good idea.
Yeah, when the interest rate goes up, the market gets very turbulent, especially right now when we've been used to very low interest rates for a very, very long time.
Yeah.
But it's crazy though, because we've been quoting steady throughout the year. And the day that they announced that they're holding rates, honestly, within 4, call it working days, excluding the weekends, we had 6 jobs close. It's crazy how much the housing market is tied to those announcements of the rate hikes.
Yeah. Right.
So it's like people are holding back because they're expecting the worst. I think people have lost faith in the feds and generally in the government and understanding where exactly those rate hikes are going to land, because for over a year now, people are saying, oh, definitely the next one they're going to hold, or, they're definitely going to start lowering. So I think people have lost faith. So once they actually held, I feel like the sentiment has been a little bit better.
Good. Yeah. So, and feedback after the property's done, like what's the most thing people say? And the first thing they say to you?
The first thing when we finish the project,
what's the first thing they usually say to you? What's the feedback you're getting?
Well, for one, it's relief. No matter how good of a job we do, it's relief. Because they're coming in and they're like, this is someone that's in their space, that's been in their space for 7-8 months in total.
Yeah.
And then hurdles after hurdles after hurdles. No matter what, it's construction. It's always intrusive. People don't love having us there. They love the end result, but they don't love the process all the time.
Of course.
So I think the first thing right away is relief. But then immediately once they start settling into the space, obviously there's the comfort of knowing that they spent the right amount of money. You didn't cut corners. Problems are not then coming up. So people love that.
Right. And where do you find the biggest bottlenecks are in your industry? Is the planning with the city, or is it customers not knowing what they want to do? What do you think? What's the biggest bottleneck?
I find the biggest bottleneck might start a little bit with the client and the expectation and the budget, because the reality is you may go into a job and this is a $200,000 job, but the client's going in and they're set because they have a buddy in the industry that says this is $100,000. I know someone that could do it for $120,000. I know someone that. So I find that a lot of the tension starts from there, because if you started on day one with a realistic assumption, I'm not going to say all your problems are going to go away, because sometimes there are surprises. You are digging below grade, but a lot of the problems could go away.
Yeah.
If you come in with some kind of reasonable budget or reasonable assumptions. I've had clients before where they come to us with the architect's drawings, with the building permits. Okay. And then they say, okay, well, this is what we're building. But they have the architect on day one, before we even get the plans, cut back on the scope. No, keep this wall, even though he recommended to change it because it's leaning over. Oh no, keep this area, even though it's sort of sagging. So we come and we build it. We're like, okay, fine, we'll keep it. We open it up. Inspector's like, no, I'm not comfortable with this. And our guys are like, we're not comfortable with it either. So now it's like, bam, this is a surprise. Yeah. But if on day one you had that realistic assumption, it would be fantastic, because everyone would know exactly what we're building. We'd move a lot faster and it would be more cost effective.
What do you find like the budget is mostly, and again, because it's different if you're doing like as an investment. In an investment, we don't want to do like higher end stuff, right? Especially in the garden suite stuff too. Are you finding that now that if people are using it for their own, they're going to be spending a little bit higher product, and then the budget's going to be a little higher? So let's say it's a residential. Somebody's using for residential purposes, whether it's in-laws, their kids, somebody else. What's the budget usually run if you just want to use already existing garage? Like, would $250 be roughly around that, because it's a little higher end?
If there's an existing garage, you can start around $120.
Really?
Yeah.
I find that's low. I'm sorry. It just shocks me. I think $120,000 barely gets you anything.
Because if there's an existing shell, you don't have to redo siding. You don't have to redo the majority of the windows, just the one where the garage door is.
Mhm.
You don't have to redo the door. You're not redoing the foundation or the framing. You're just doing partition walls in the middle. So if the shell is solid, you're around 120.
Right. But then,
starting.
But the problem is if you're using just the shell, then you're not going to use your garage, right? Because you're going to be living in that space. If you want to build above it, probably makes more sense, no?
Depends. Yeah. Well, yes, you can definitely do that. But if you're looking to just retrofit the existing garage and you're like, look, I put my bank account, all I have is 120 or 140, whatever it is, retrofit the existing shell. You're still going to get a good bang for your buck.
Yeah.
But if you want to add on top of it, yes, you're now talking no less than 200,000. And I'm assuming a space of, something reasonable, which is 450 square feet on one level.
Yeah. So where do you see this business going? Like, where do you see like now the next, if interest rates go down,
mm-hmm.
and you're saying too, like, is that going to help your business? Because now with interest rates go down, people have more cash, or is it going to hurt your business because now people may be looking to purchase? I don't know. Actually, I think if interest rates go up and prices go up, so then their business might be booming a little bit more.
You know what? I think this period of time where rates were going up and it was a little bit turbulent in the market over the last 2 years have really weeded out some of the people, because what I found that happened is the guys that have a good business model, a good team, reliable crews, they deliver, whatever projects that they say they're going to deliver, they deliver those projects and they deliver them quality. There isn't that crazy turbulence that you get in construction.
Yeah.
I found that people like that have stayed very, very busy over the last 2 years. But it's the kind of Joe Schmoes that the businesses fell through, because in the times where interest rates are higher, what happens? The market segregates. So you have two types of investors. You have the entry-level investor, and then you have the experienced repeat investor. In the high interest rate environment, it sort of weeded out those entry-level investors. And then you have the guys that are repeat. Those kind of guys make a lot different decisions than the entry-level investor, because they are more sophisticated. They understand that, okay, with that higher cost of hiring a reliable trade, the project may actually end up at that price. So they don't go necessarily for the cheapest price. And it's kept a lot of the good contractors busy.
Yeah. I think the same has happened in our industry too.
Yeah.
Yeah. People fly, I think in times where things get hard, they go to quality. And I think we always try to push quality. I think that keeps us afloat.
Quality and reliable.
100%.
The entry level, think about it.
And communication.
For sure. The entry level agent may not be as reliable, right? Because if they were surviving off a deal or two a year, well, now how are your deals today versus 3-4 years ago? I'm not in the industry, but I can guarantee that 3-4 years ago, it would take you a lot less time that you're investing on every single deal, versus today, it's a lot more intensive. So you actually have to put in the work. So for the last 2 years, you
have to put in the work, right?
Yes, for the last 2 years, it's been like that.
I know.
You actually have to put in the work to make a dollar.
Market. I actually love this market, and the reason why I'm saying I think this market is because you can show your true colors. Mm-hmm. You can see how you can stand out above everybody else, and we no longer get pushed back. And same with you guys. Like when everyone else is being a contractor, what I've done through a million of them, like, oh, why is your price so cheap? I was like, because it's a shit job. Mm-hmm. But I like this industry because it's like now it's like pushback, like where when the market was really hot, literally I could put up a sign and anybody could sell a house. Now you have to do all the marketing. Yeah. You have to know what sells. You have to use the right words. You have to bring people and do open house. Like you said, you have to work. You have to show your stripes, basically. And contractors are the same thing. But the problem with contractors is it's like a lot of times, new investors coming in, they don't know the difference between quality and quantity. So I always tell people, talk to somebody who's used them before. Interview 3-4 of them. If you're just going on price, forget about it. Like, you're going to get burned.
Yeah. Like how exactly can you describe a project like a build in a contract? Like, yes, you can. Framing, X number of walls, X number of square feet. Yes, you can. But can you really describe every single nut and bolt and dot the I's and cross the T's? No. After a certain amount of time, it relies on the personal reputation of the company. So if they have a good reputation, you just know they're going to deliver, whether it says it there or it doesn't say it there.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, 100%. I love that. And so we always try to push and say, so I would say to anybody else as well, like if they're going to interview you and like what I've seen, you've done an amazing job, but talk to people that have used you before, right? And like get some references, see some of the projects they've done before. Don't just go with the people that always go for cheap. They're the ones always called, then they'll call you back to fix their issue.
Yeah.
And it's going to cost you double.
Yes, because nobody wants to do rework. Nobody wants to do that.
No, I love it. Yeah. So how did you find the transition going from basically, well, you went from an engineer job. I guess you started construction right away though, right? Too, but most people find that's a different thing going from like basically a desk job and putting on the construction boots.
I started off in the field, so I was always more involved in on the construction side. I just went to consulting because I happened to want to leave that fly in, fly out life and come get something that's within a city where there's people. So it just happened to be a consulting job at that time.
Right. Yeah. So where do you see your company being in the next 5 years?
This next year, 2024, we have a lot more focus on public projects as well. So I'm starting to see that the average project size is growing a lot. So a lot of the smaller jobs are sort of being weeded out. And I think it goes back to the same discussion we were just having about all the rate hikes, weeding out the sort of entry-level investors and the smaller projects. So the projects are getting more and more complex. So we are building the team around that. So I'm investing a lot more time, a lot more energy and effort into building the office team, more systems in place, making sure that all of them are, being followed and all the processes are being followed so we can continue to deliver quality work, but also on scale. I don't just want to be able to deliver 20, 30 homes a year, like we currently do as quality. No, I want to be able to still maintain that exact same quality, 60, 80, 100 homes a year. That's a lot more challenging because you got to put a lot more emphasis on the process. Sorry.
Yeah. Well, I love this fact because you nailed something I read before. It's about the checklist. There's a couple of books out there. I forget the names of them, obviously, off the top of my head. But it talks, and you're talking about basically checklists. And that's how you're able to roll up because they had this, the book I was reading, it was talking about the ER. And they couldn't understand why all of a sudden there's all these patients, like I think 70% of them or 25% of them were getting infections. They couldn't figure out what it was. 75% were fine. And they realized they were missing spots. They're missing things like, they weren't cleaning utensils. So literally, even though these were seasoned veterans, like I know too. They're like, okay, we'll just start doing a checklist. They started doing a checklist. The amount of infections went down to less than 1%.
Wow.
And from that, because then you didn't have to do further care on them. Yes. They're able to see more patients. So what you're describing to me is I think the checklist, like you're kind of saying right now, is able to make sure things are done properly and you're able to grow the business.
Yeah.
Is that right?
That's exactly it. And you're predictable. It's basically the exact opposite of going to, little Joe Schmo that, has no problem getting his hands dirty. And then, sure, maybe this one job gets delivered properly, but then you hire him 1 year later, he doesn't even have any of the same guys again. And then you don't have that consistent quality. Yeah. The consistency counts for something in this market.
Nice. So believe it or not, we'll have to wrap up soon. Yeah. I know the time flies by. I know when you're asking questions, I love this stuff. I can talk about it all day. But I don't want to get too involved about my personal stuff because I may be calling you. So if somebody wants to before we wrap up, there's a couple things I want to ask. One, if somebody's looking to be an entrepreneur, and I always ask the entrepreneurs, like, what is one piece of advice you would give them before making the leap into entrepreneurship and building their own business? Is there anything you'd say?
I would say if the thing that makes an entrepreneur extremely successful is how persistent you are. If you're so persistent that whether the days are good or days are bad, whether it's sunny or whether it's raining outside, you still go out and you still get the work done and the discipline is embedded in you, you're going to be very successful.
That's gold. I love that. Yeah. You're the first person to say that. That's good because it's not always, it's the discipline. It's not the ambition.
Yeah.
Right. That makes you successful. I love that. It's consistency. Those words are like ringing to me. And if somebody wants to see the quality of work, like if they want to hire you, what's the best way for them to see like the quality of work you've done? Besides Instagram, we'll get your Instagram, all this stuff later on to see how they can contact you. But say or a checklist. What should they be looking for when they're looking at your work or another contractor?
There's a lot of things that people can look for, but I would say simplify it a little bit. And if you can do one task that checks off 90% of that checklist, then do that instead. And that task is asking the contractor to go to one of their current active sites. If we have any client where we've given a proposal out to, and they say, okay, look, guys, we want to sign, but we're still not sure. We want to see it. Seeing is believing, right? Yeah. So then they say, okay, we want to look at our sites. We'll say, sure. Here are our 17 active sites. That's what we currently have. Pick one of them. These are the ones that are similar to yours. We'll show up and then have a look at it. This one is at this stage. That one is at that stage.
I love that.
Yeah.
I've never had a contractor say that to me.
Yeah, because most...
I don't want to say that. I don't say it. Well, you can read into that. And I've dealt with a lot of contractors, right? A lot of them. So anyway, But now wrapping, so if somebody wants to reach out, see your work on maybe Instagram, is that the best way for them to reach out? And what is
the best way to reach us is on Instagram, Newfore Inc., or you can go to our website, www.newfore.com. If you already have a project and you're looking to get a quote, there's a quote me button right there. You can submit everything directly online and we'll get in touch within 24 hours.
And Newfore is spelled Newfore.
Correct.
Right. And obviously, I'm David Chinelli. We'd love for you to reach out, follow along, subscribe, make comments. I want to hear comments from you. Like, what do you guys think about these garden suites? What do you think about the content? And we always loved your love, and Owen's back there. He's nodding. He's like, yeah, we always want to hear the feedback, right, bud? All right. Well, thank you so much for coming. Hopefully you get some business with us lately. Some of my followers, I think they need to reach out and see the amazing work you've done because you've done an awesome job. So congrats.
Thank you so much, David. Thanks for having me.
All right. Ciao.
Ciao.